All right, welcome back. This is the Uptime podcast. This is episode 7. I'm your co-host, Dan Blewett, and I'm joined here remotely by lightning protection expert Alan Hall. Alan, how you doing?
Hey, Dan. Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Doing great. A little more energy this week. A lot of rain, but it didn't deter me. I got some good smells going on in my place at the moment. I got some pine tree scented wax melt or something. So
it smells like the outside, the thing you haven't seen.
It smells like the forest. Yes. So doing all right. How are you doing?
Well, we're just kind of in quarantine mode. The governor extended our quarantine till May 18th. So we thought we were going to get off out of this quarantine sometime next week. That was the original plan. I think of May 4th or 5th was the original date. So now we're out to May 18th, and everybody's going stir crazy. Massachusetts has had a little bit of uptick in coronavirus cases, new cases. So the issue is Massachusetts is a very long state, very narrow states, and Boston's near the water, and we live on the far opposite end. In fact, we're on the state line. So when things happen in Boston, what tends to happen is the whole state ends up doing the same thing. So Boston, being the capital of Massachusetts, decides that there's an issue in Boston for coronavirus, so the whole state shuts down. So we on the western part of the state are just kind of wondering what's going on and when we can kind of get back to work. In fact, today I thought, I was just going to and from the office and thought, boy, there's a lot of cars on the road today. So I kind of wonder if people are starting to hit the streets again. You see a lot of masks, and everybody's got a mask on, and the grocery stores are full of masks. You see people walking up and down the streets, which you didn't see a week ago. So people are starting to get out and about a little bit. I think in our case, it's pretty calm in this part of the state.
Yeah, well, so what's your opinion? So I was talking about this on one of my other podcasts, the idea of, business is opening back up and people are starting to get, like you said, more than just a rumbling, but I mean, some people are protesting, obviously, about, we need to get back to work. Yeah. Let us take on the risk, whatever. Obviously, I don't know why barbers have been like the highlighted ones. I don't know why, like, I've seen a salon owner like on the news. I get that. Like, I have no issue with salons and barbershops opening up. Like, small foot traffic, I feel like that's reasonable if you're going to slowly, let some businesses reopen. That seems completely fine. Like, we can't be in this forever, right?
Right. We can't be in forever. Don't you worry more about being on a bus or being in a taxi than being I would too. Those places don't make any sense to me. I'm not going to a movie theater. I'm not going to a concert. But one-on-one with interaction, obviously, someone who's cutting your hair is going to be dealing with a lot of people from the surrounding area, typically, not coming from too far away, usually. So I think it's just sort of where the risk is and whether it's worth the risk. I think one-on-one, where everybody's doing really well. I've seen a lot of hand washing. I've seen a lot of masks. I've seen a lot of people not touching their face.
Yeah.
So if you change their behavior and people's behaviors have changed, then it becomes a lot less of a risk. I think everybody's on high alert still, but you don't see anybody to walk up to you and say hello. They're 6 to 8, 10 feet away. They're stopping to say hello. Okay. Yeah. I think that's fine.
Well, and you start to think about, like, what are the odds the one person that I go spend, a minute with, like, if you're just like stop a random stranger on the street right now and just like sit down and have coffee with them, like, what are the odds that one person has coronavirus? You know what I mean?
Low.
Like, it's very low, and especially in certain places, it's a lot lower. What's weird in DC right now, they send out, like, if you follow Mayor Bowser, who I think is doing a really good job. If you follow her Twitter account, she tweets out every day the new cases, like the overall breakdown of ages, of deaths, of cases by ethnicity, by age, like all these different stats. And unfortunately, and this is sad, more than half, I think, of the cases in D.C. are to African Americans. And I think it's a lot because there's just a larger population in some of the more impoverished areas. And so they also show a breakdown of the 8 D.C. wards. So D.C. is broken up into 8 wards. Yeah. And the 4 most low socioeconomic status wards have over 50% of the cases themselves. So it's clearly it's concentrated in the poor areas, which is sad, and it's reflected in every bit of the stats. And so in my ward, which I'm more in the center of DC, like I'm a mile or two from the White House, and there's a lot more industry there. There's a lot more business. There's a lot more monuments. There's a lot more green space, and it's a little more expensive to live there.
Less crowded.
Yeah, there's only 350 cases in my ward, and there's 4,000 in DC right now, I think, something like that. So it's really interesting, the disparity. Like the three most expensive to live wards have a very low incidence compared to the overall. Like one ward has as many as 3 wards combined. So it's really weird here in DC. But you start to think about, like, again, if like a high-end salon opens up in the middle of the city, is that a big risk? Certainly not. No. And just like some of these smaller shops, but if you walk in and out of a grocery store, there's a lot of risk, but obviously we need groceries. So it really is a complex time, and
are they going to open public transportation? There's a subway system in DC. Are they going to open that?
That's been open the whole time, and I've gone
Get
on it.
out.
Yeah, and I've been on it a bunch of times on the subway. Don't feel unsafe at all because I have a whole car to myself. So I've only taken the metro once in the last 3 weeks, I think. And even then, it was the same thing. Like, you walk in, you swipe your card. I literally don't touch a single thing. I sit down, just put my hands on my lap. There's no one in my car probably. And then I get out, the door opens for me. I walk up the escalator, swipe my card, and I leave. It's almost like a touchless interaction.
Whoa.
And so, but yeah, it's been running because that's a lifeline in the city. People need the subway to go places, but
they do. But
same thing there. You don't see, the only people you really see taking the subway, besides me occasionally, is just lower income people, unfortunately.
And so how's the Uber? Is Uber still running?
I wouldn't take an Uber, and that's the other thing. It's like
take the subway, but not Uber.
Yeah, because I'm not touching anything, and I can control how far away I am from other people in the metro. Whereas in an Uber, I'm in their car. Okay. Like I know I'm going to be 6 feet from them in the back seat, but I'm that distance from them no matter what. Whereas on the metro, I can position myself in a huge empty subway station and in a huge subway car to be as far away from another human as I want. I feel like that's a relatively good choice.
Well, I would have thought of it completely the opposite. I thought the subways would have been first. I thought the subways were shut down, but if they're not shut down, they would still have a pretty decent amount of traffic on them. Where versus
dead
versus Uber, which is sort of a one-on-one, so it would have been like 100-to-1 versus 1-to-1. Your bets are you're probably better off 1-to-1, even if you're a little bit closer.
Yeah, which again, that's being logically consistent. Exactly what I said before. Like, what are the odds that your Uber driver has it? But at the same time, you start taking like socioeconomic status into it. Maybe you think more Uber drivers are likely to have it because they're driving around, and rather than, I don't know. It's a fascinating discussion.
Do they have any idea about the taxi drivers, Uber drivers? It doesn't matter. Guys driving vans to the airport. Are there cases? I'd be like, well, one of the things where exactly right, because you're maybe touching different parts of the community, whether those people are running around different parts of the community or starting to pick up the virus or not. Wow.
Yeah, okay. Well, I think people, it seems like, and this is just kind of conjecture on my part, but I think people in DC who have the means are just staying home. They're not really going many places. Whereas I would guess that Uber rides in the city are probably people that still need to go to work. And so they're taking Uber to go to work, which means they're working around other people, right? So maybe people who are taking Uber are more likely to be in contact with other people, more likely to then to pick it up, more likely then to give it to an Uber driver. Who knows? It's just it's all conjecture, but it's sad that I guess more of the have-nots are getting it. You never want to see that trend.
No.
But just more densely populated, and there's a large homeless population in DC. And when I leave my apartment and go for a walk, I'm going to go for a run when we're done filming tonight. I'm going to run past a bunch of groups of people that are just outside, either just shooting the breeze with each other, or they're just congregating, just doing whatever, or they're living outside. There's a lot of tents in DC, and so you just know that when you live outside, you're gonna be more at risk because you're just gonna be around other people. So it's tough. There's a lot of interesting factors that are some really sad, and it's just complicated. The whole thing's complicated.
It's really complicated. I just hope that we're on the downside of this, or as we were told a month ago, we needed to flatten the curve. Hopefully you guys are flattening the curve. Up here, we're definitely on the downside, or flat, and we've been flattened for a week or more.
Yeah, I don't know. I think cases are slowly increasing in DC. I'm not super plugged into it. I'm just kind of doing my thing, but
Yeah.
it's
Wow.
again, I don't. People seem to be abiding it pretty well, but I think the homeless population and just like the poorer population, because there is a big divide depending on where you live, and DC
Yep.
rents are very expensive.
Yep. Oh yeah.
It's I think there's just a bigger gap there than anywhere else. So when you
Wow.
start to think of the where I live exactly in the city, what are the rates like? There's mine are still very very low, fortunately.
Good.
So anyway, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's an interesting, a lot of stuff going on. So in the wind turbine industry, we were just talking. There was one major wind turbine damage that made a little bit of news. So what was the story out in Cairo?
Yeah, down in southeast Kansas, they had either a high wind situation, which I'm not sure that would be the right answer, or a lightning issue where a blade just really got destroyed and hit the nacelle and did a bunch of damage. So they're investigating down there to see what the issue is. Obviously, they're going to go back and take a look at the weather data to see if there was a lightning strike nearby, and obviously it's going to take them a while to figure out exactly what happened. Plus, the turbine's out of operation, and they got a bunch of cleanup to do and repairs to do. So they got their hands full, especially now with all the coronavirus stuff. Now, southeast Kansas is not the most populous place in the world.
It's the mecca of the world. That's where the technology.
There's a lot of
everything starts and stops.
Yeah, there's a lot of good people down there. Independence, Kansas. Independence, Kansas is just sort of north of Tulsa, Oklahoma. So you're kind of in that Oklahoma, Kansas area, and it's a neat area, but it's not highly populated. So getting people out to this place to get this wind turbine fixed is going to be probably a big effort. Oh boy.
Yeah, and like you said, in this, there's probably just no timetable for that, right?
No, right? I think the first thing is to figure out what happened and then get everything disassembled, get another blade out there if they're going to repair it, get another blade out there, get it installed, get the nacelle fixed up. It's just like any sort of significant aircraft incident where you have a breakage on an aircraft. You're sort of trying to decode what has just happened so you catch everything and put it all back the way that it should be. It's a big effort. It's going to take a lot of man hours. So if it's a lightning strike, it's going to be very expensive lightning strike for sure.
So what is the cost typically if a wind turbine loses a blade? It's like $1 million a blade typically?
Well, no. They're $100,000-ish dollars, depending. Well, it depends on the size. The larger they are, the bigger, the more expensive they are. But to replace one usually means bringing out a crane. Cranes are pretty expensive, depending if you can get a hold of one. Now there should be a lot of them available, you'd think, but that's going to be 100-ish, maybe more grand to get the crane out there, depending on how big the wind turbine is too, because the bigger they come, the fewer cranes there are. It's going to be a couple $100,000, and especially when the blade comes off and hits the nacelle and does some destruction up there too. Then you're adding onto the cost because you got to put a new nacelle cover on. You've got to fix all the equipment that got damaged when the parts of the blade came through. Hopefully, they didn't hurt the generator. The worst case ones is when the blade goes bad and hits the tower and takes out the tower, and the whole thing comes collapsing down. That's a loss right there. So they still have a lot of work to do. That's not a fun time. That's going to be a lot of extra work they weren't planning on doing right now. Could you pick a worse time for it to happen? No, you couldn't have. So it's just one of those acts of nature, I guess, where you just have to deal with it.
Yeah. Well, it could be producing jobs. So hey, if you want to go clean up this wind turbine, pick up all the pieces, throw them in a satchel.
Yeah, that's probably
there's some
true.
work for you in Kansas.
There's parts. And one thing about Kansas is it's windy, so whatever hit the dirt is probably blowing around.
Scattered all over, Missouri and everywhere else. So.
And that's a little bit north of Tornado Alley. Tornado Alley tends to be Wichita area and on the diagonal there up to kind of Omaha, Nebraska. But there's still a lot of wind down there. Kansas is always windy. I lived there for 5 years. I remember tool sets blowing down the driveway because of the wind.
Yikes.
Yeah, you're like, whoa, is it really that windy? Oh, yeah, it always blows 30 miles an hour. Welcome to Kansas. First thing you notice when you move out of Kansas is it's not windy anymore.
Yeah, wind is the worst. It's just like it's the worst. If it's breezy's the best. Windy's the worst.
Yeah, but it makes great power. I'll tell you that much. It makes great power.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. So when these wind turbines are damaged, how do these insurance claims go? I mean, I know you said in the past that wind farm owners are very cautious with insuring everything they can, and so
Yeah.
I think you mentioned that you stepped on to a wind farm and they made sure that you had insurance to do that. So,
Yeah.
how well do they handle this stuff from an insurance standpoint?
Well, everything's about mitigating risk. So the times I've been to different wind turbine sites, usually they want an insurance policy of $1 million before you can even walk onto the facility to look at anything. Which I always think is odd, because the reason I'm there is I'm trying to save them millions of dollars, yet I got to have $1 million insurance policy. I'm not sure what I'm going to do while I'm there that would cause $1 million worth of damage. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Trip and maybe fall off of one, maybe. The wind turbines are pretty rugged.
Then it falls over, then it falls over, and it's just like you look around and 11 have toppled over like dominoes. And you
just like dominoes.
And then you slink into the bushes like Homer Simpson.
That would be the only scenario.
Do you know what I'm talking about? That meme?
Yes.
That's amazing.
That's the thing that kind of runs through your head. Like, I don't know how I could do that much damage unless I set these things on fire. And even then, I'm not sure. But yeah, so everybody is risk conscious, and with warranties and insurance policies, you got to have insurance on something like that. It's just like having insurance on your automobile or on your home. You're going to have insurance on it, so you want to try to mitigate the amount of claims you're going to make, right? And the insurance company doesn't want you to make claims, so they want you to do the right thing, make sure you're maintaining everything. So it's kind of a vicious circle. It's just like with your automobile, right? They got those little sensors you put in your cars now, so they can track you to make sure you're not driving too fast or driving too erratically, and they give you discounts on your insurance. It's sort of a similar thing, right? So if you take good care of your wind turbines, don't have a lot of claims, in theory, your rates will go down. It's a marketplace like anything else.
Well, speaking of warranties, so what's the typical warranty period that wind farmer gets when he installs a brand new wind turbine on his property? And how does that work?
So the company that wants to install the developer, and so when the developer wants to install a new wind turbine site, typically the OEMs offer a warranty somewhere between 2 and 5 years. 5 years, I hear a lot more 5 years than I've heard in the past, but 5 year tends to be a very typical warranty period. So they have 5 years to sort of, I call it, in the aircraft industry and other industries, computer industries, where I first heard it was infant mortality. So as a new device starts, it's more likely to die in those first couple of months / years, and at the very end of the life, it's in the middle. Once you get past those first couple of months and years, you're going to be in kind of stable territory. So that's the highest risk points in the first couple of months when things tend to break.
Why is that? Is that they're catching like big defects?
You're catching things. Yeah, you can catch things that are sort of manufacturing defects that you couldn't see. Like if you had some defect in the blade you couldn't inspect, and then as you get it up, you start operating and you put the loads in the blades, and obviously those defects get amplified. Same thing in electrical equipment. Any kind of semiconductor device, you like to have burn-in time before you start using it, because it's in that initial burning time when most of the devices will fail. Once you get past that burn-in time, you usually have a very successful life. It's just like a new car. When you buy a new car, in that first 6 months, if the motor rolls over dead, that's not great. That's why they offer those sort of warranties that are front loaded. The first 2 years you got a warranty. Your first 3 years you're going to cover ground to the top. So it's the same sort of thing in wind turbines. So as you get it, you want to make sure that you're covered for those first couple of years in case there's some sort of manufacturing defect, not necessarily at the OEM, but maybe from one of their suppliers that you couldn't visually see, and it just rears its ugly head in those first couple of months. So insurance is a big deal there.
And so I've heard, like some companies like SkySpecs, that their inspections are helping some of these wind farm owners kind of tap into those warranties right before they run out. Like you want to get stuff repaired right before it runs out. Is that true?
Yeah. So what you want to do before the warranty runs out, you want to get all the claims in. So if you do have some sort of OEM related defect, you want to catch it before the warranty runs out.
Yeah, for sure.
right? It's just like with a car. Before the car warranty runs out, you want to take it to the shop, make sure everything's okay before you continue on using the vehicle. The same thing happens on wind turbines. The problem with wind turbines is they're so massive. To do any thorough inspection, let's say you have 100 turbines, to do an inspection on 100 turbines would take normally a lot of time. So what happens is that the operators or owners, developers, depending who's owning at the time or who's going to buy it, they want to do an inspection, so they would take samples so there's 100 turbines out there, they'll sample 5 and then extrapolate out and then come to some agreement with the insurance company about how much they're going to pay out. With something like SkySpecs, because they can scan each of the blades in the turbines within roughly 15 minutes per turbine, they can do a whole a whole farm of turbines in a day and have really detailed data. So it just changes the whole marketplace, because now instead of sampling 5 out of the 100, well, they can't do 100 turbines in a day, but say they do 30 or 40 in a day. So within 3 days, they're going to scan every single turbine that's on that site and have detailed data where turbine 1 is fine, but turbine 5, 22, and 14, and 38 all have these issues that you wouldn't have caught otherwise because you're doing random selections. So it does change the marketplace, because now the next owner of that turbine site, or the current owner, gets insurance to collect and to fix those turbines. If they're going to sell it, they're going to sell a product that has been brought up to snuff before the transaction happens. So it helps everybody, right? But it does put a little bit more onus on the OEMs to make sure those wind turbines, at least get through that warranty period without many difficulties. So there's a catch-22 there a little bit on the OEM side. But for somebody like SkySpecs, it makes a lot of sense where they can come in and quickly do a number of inspections, accurate inspections, and it just gives everybody data, right? Our whole world right now is depending upon data to make smart decisions, and I don't know how anybody would do without actually looking at each turbine. That's the only thing that makes sense to me.
Yeah, no, that's that makes a lot of sense, and obviously the faster you can get them all assessed and get that process done, that's going to be way easier. Of course, I'm sure 5 years ago when there were no drone inspections, or 10 years ago, whenever it was a huge process. Like, let's get 100 men out on ropes and climb. Like, that's
not possible, right?
Terrible process.
Yeah, a couple of guys going down on ropes, and they're doing a visual inspection. They can't do nearly as much as a drone can do, especially from SkySpecs. Those things run so fast and take so much data. There's no way a human could do that. No way.
Yeah, so there's a really interesting article I want to cover today. It's called "How Digital Twins Could Transform the Wind Energy Industry." It's by Sue Banker-Powell, who's a guest contributor to their site. And basically, the article is about how, with obviously these physical assets like a wind turbine, you're essentially can think of the data that you harvest from it with enough really good, like high quality sensors, making a digital twin or a digital mirror of the assets. I'll read a line from it, that says, so this information can be sent via the cloud to a piece of software for interpretation and scrutiny, either in the form of a 3D digital representation or raw data. So basically they're taking all this data and saying, here's what this data looks like as a 3-dimensional representation of the wind turbine. I don't know why I said turbine. Don't need to throw in the British accent. How do you feel about this? That sort of like breaks my brain a little bit. How do you feel about this?
Well, it's similar to what we have already done on aircraft in a sense where, especially on helicopters, anything that rotates vibrates. And so a rotating wind turbine blade, there's always vibration and shaking and stresses and loads. A helicopter is very similar. It sounds like what like Sikorsky did years ago. They got these health and monitoring systems on there where they're sensing for unusual vibrations. They know what a good vibration is because the helicopter is always shaking. So you look for good vibrations when you see something start to wander from what's normal is. You can flag it and catch it early before something bad happens or catastrophic happens. But in that system, it's just shoving out data. It doesn't really tell you exactly what's going on the helicopter. And it sounds like in this wind turbine application where they've got this virtual twin, they're trying to take the data, or they have a bunch of sensors on the wind turbines. They're trying to take that data and provide a visual image of what's actually happened. That's probably the most difficult part for anybody who's working in O&M is to visualize what this sensor data actually means in terms of reality. You know, Dan, maybe if you see a bunch of just raw data on a chart, what does it mean?
Yeah, I just go blind. I go blind essentially. Yeah.
Yeah, you're like, I don't know. What does this mean? What does it mean? I got to change the bearings in this wind turbine, or does it mean I just need to change the fuse over here? I don't know,
Yeah.
right? Probably, and that's probably where they're going. If you could create a virtual wind turbine and say, hey, point to the area where you think the issues are, maybe the areas where there may be problems. Obviously, using previous data to help pinpoint where new problems can occur. That's not a bad move, right?
Yeah, well, and it kind of reminds me of, like all those futuristic movies where all like the war rooms, right? It's got like they have this big table and they like manipulate all the little screens, like they're moving it around a symphony. I was actually watching Minority Report.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Which was terrible as a movie.
What?
It was terrible. I actually
What? Oh my gosh!
/ read the book by Philip K. Dick, and I really enjoyed it. It was like a very intelligent, they changed so much of it. Now, was the movie visually like fun? Absolutely.
Okay.
But anyway.
That's a Tom Cruise movie.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm not
how many bad Tom Cruise
movie? I'm not a huge fan of Tom Cruise. He's insane. Doing all this crazy. Anyway.
Mission Impossible?
He's a good actor. All right.
Okay.
All right. I'm not a huge action movie person, so I have a tough time separating the fact that he's like an insane person in real life versus his characters.
He's an actor.
He is a good actor. Yeah. He acts a sane person in his movies, and then he's insane in real life. Anyway, but in that movie, he's like, one of the first scenes is him like manipulating the data from the precogs. Who, if you've never seen Minority Report or read the book, I highly recommend the book. It's only like a 5-hour audiobook. Not super long, but basically the premise here, getting off task, is that Tom Cruise's character runs the pre-crime unit, which there's these 3 basically mutated humans who can see into the future, and they spit out this data into. They basically say like this murder is going to happen, so then the pre-crime unit goes out there and arrests the person before they commit the murder. And of course, in the book, it's like all crimes. It's not just murder. In the movie, it's only murder. But so Tom Cruise is like visualizing. He's got this visual big glass screen that shows the readout of the data of like basically what the precogs, these beings seeing in the future are seeing. He's like trying to like make it make sense. And so I feel like that's kind of what this is. Like obviously, like so many of those futuristic movies have these things where it's like this table where they're visualizing the data. It's like these big table computers or holographic computers. But this kind of reminds me of the same thing where you could have, like, you walk into this big room that's like your dedicated virtual digital twin room, and there's your whole wind farm, like in augmented reality, operating. You can see how how fast every blade's spinning, like where they're oriented, all that stuff, and it'll tell you, the bearings are, getting a little hot on this one, or like this one's, all those sensors are giving you all this data, and you can say, oh, turbine number 17 looks like he needs some attention next week. He's been, running a little sluggish or whatever it is. And
so it's kind of like Iron Man, right? You ever seen Iron Man? You're not a Robert Downey Jr. fan either? Oh my God.
I do like Robert Downey Jr., but I just like am not in the movie / TV world in the last bunch of years.
Infinity War, the most popular movie ever.
I watched him. I watched him on the Joe Rogan podcast, which I liked. He seems like a very thoughtful, good dude. But
he may be a great dude, but Iron Man, Infinity Wars, Avengers, none of it.
I'm not as nerdy as you. All right, I'm not a.
This is not nerd. Most of the world has seen it. You're in the slight sliver of society that has not seen it. If there's anybody that's the nerd,
you're getting upset, which is just giving me more. You're validating my nerd.
Your nerd instinct.
My nerd labeling of you. That's all.
I'm not sensitive. You're sensitive, right? Isn't that how it works? Right?
Exactly. No, I was a Spider-Man kid growing up, and I like the Spider-Man movies, but they're like they keep changing. Where it's
the same movie every time. I've seen the same movie 3 times. Come on.
I agree. Anyway, I digress. But this idea seems pretty interesting. Because again, it was just like this stream of data into spreadsheets, and like what human being has the I mean, obviously some of these data scientists do, but this seems like it would make sense going forward to have a
Yeah,
visual readout of
translating
this.
data to
Yeah, for
reality
sure.
is the hardest part of anything, right? It's just like your iPhone; it's a bunch of noise in the backside, but it's translated to something you can actually use. It sounds very it's similar to that, right? Anything that gets to a good user interface is going to be successful.
Well, it also opens up
Yeah.
these jobs potentially to people that aren't just the ones who are gifted enough to be able to stare at just
Aren't nerdy
raw
enough
data.
to do it, right? Right, yeah.
Exactly. But in all seriousness, I mean, there's a lot of people who are very visual learners or very
Yeah.
auditory
Half the world.
learners or whatever. Yeah, and this could
Yeah.
say, oh, I could do this job. Whereas
Sure.
in reality, 10 years ago, it's like I don't want to just be looking at data streams all day and in spreadsheets or all that. So that's interesting. It could potentially open this up to a lot of other people.
Yeah, it could.
Last thing I want to cover today is Vestas. So it says wind giant Vestas is cutting, it looks like about 400 jobs. So obviously some more downturns for the industry just because of coronavirus and all the potential implications. And I think some companies are trying to get out ahead of it. So what are your thoughts?
I understand why they're doing it. I understand the financial implications. So they're trying to make sure the company is secure financially as they go forward. And once the coronavirus thing tampers down, hopefully by the end of this year, we can all get back at it again. But in the meantime, man, it just delays all the great things that they've been working on, and it pushes everything to the right. So, in the wind turbine industry, new techniques, designs, improvements are just part of that industry. And when you take 400 people off the playing field, it just slows down the whole industry. So, it not only hurts economically because all those people have to find something else to do or just kind of find other work. You hate to lose them. You want them to come back, right? You want everybody to come back to where they were to get everything up and running again. But man, it's a big blow because it's hard to find good people in wind. It's such a specific field, and you have to take a specific skill set a lot of times to do the things that they're doing. Once you lose those people, it's not like you can always get them back. So it just sets back companies. We see that in aircraft every 7 years. It goes through cycles, and a lot of good people go off and say, I'm not doing that again. I'm not going to be an industry that's cyclical like that. And they'll go find something that's more stable, go work for a government somewhere. And it just drives slow periods in the economy and improvements in the world. It just does. You see it down there in Washington, D.C., right? Things in Washington, D.C. are pretty stable government-wise. The most stable job is probably be working for the government.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I do assume there's probably a lot of stability here in the city because a lot of lawyers who I assume are probably still doing the same work. There's a lot of government jobs, obviously, like the IRS is here, like all these big agencies are here. There's a lot of nonprofits. Those ones are probably a little more questionable in this climate. But yeah, those are three big ones for sure.
Yeah, you just hate to see it.
There's a lot of tech over here as well, just in the DMV area, the DC Metro Virginia. So
yeah. Well, hopefully though, at least in the wind turbine industry, we can get back going again. And obviously, if you're working in an industrial site, which most of these wind turbine places are quasi-industrial, depending on what part of the business you're working in, you could be close to work with somebody else as you're trying to assemble these nacelles and generators and things of that sort. So you don't want to be working that close together. And some part it makes sense that you're going to provide some separation, but layoffs are a different story. Everybody's going home. That's not good.
Yeah, I mean, and I think one of the big questions is like if there's any of these startup companies, like obviously there's a lot of startup like drone inspection companies in the wind sector. It takes a lot more capital to get into the manufacturing blades or manufacturing wind turbines themselves. But a lot of these small companies are probably maybe not going to survive, or they're going to have to really pivot heavily and quickly to survive the downturn. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be interesting times, right? We're in interesting times.
Well, I think the one thing that's, and this is, I'm speaking probably a little bit from ignorance, but I mean, it seems like the inspection repair stuff, at least for the technicians themselves, is a highly specialized job.
Yeah,
I mean, so I think they're still probably hopefully going to be in still very heavy demand as they start to ease restrictions. Because I assume as soon as a lot of these restrictions are eased, they're going to be sending repairmen back out real quick to get these turbines looked at that haven't had any attention the last couple of months.
Yeah, it's a big part of the industry. The springtime, at least in the northern hemisphere, as things warm up over the wintertime, it's very hard to go out and do repairs or to do inspections for that matter. So now's the time where everybody usually is getting to go.
It's a
April, May.
Lovely time to be 800 feet off the ground dangling from a rope. Yeah.
Hey, it's above freezing. Right? So it beats being out there when it's 0 outside. So you'll see a lot of activity typically this time of year. So it's like April, May, June, right? This is the big go out there and fix stuff that happened over the wintertime. So if everybody is sitting at home waiting to get back to work, man, they're going to have more work by the time they get out there. So they're going to be really busy once some of the restrictions have been lifted.
Yeah, and if anyone's out there listening and you want to take me on like a ride along to go up the turbine, and I'll even repair it, I'll work for free, I'd be terrified. So I might need a second, like a adult diaper or something. But if you want to bring me along, just send us an email, dan.blewett. Yeah. Just hit me up.
Put a GoPro on your helmet and go.
Oh, for sure. It would be a fascinating experience, and I do.
Oh, yeah,
I
that's
mean,
cool.
Once you learn all the safety stuff, and
Yep.
I mean, these guys with the ropes, the rigging is pretty incredible, and they know what they're doing to stay safe. There's a lot of redundancy and very high skill. I mean, like, again, that's a very technical job.
A lot of training.
But that'd be pretty cool to be on top of one of those things.
Yeah.
The views are amazing. So open invitation. If you want to have me come along,
Just DM Dan, right?
Just let me know. Yeah. So, all right, Alan, we're gonna wrap up. But another good episode. If you're out there listening, thank you for being here on the Uptime podcast. Just as a reminder, leave us a review for the show. You can find us on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube. So for full episodes on video and for short clips as well, we kind of chop the show up into topical clips. Just so when you're just on the move and you don't have time for a whole 30, 40-minute episode, you can grab a quick bite. And be sure to visit us on the web at weatherguardwind.com, and obviously at all of our social media outlets, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram. We are at WG Lightning. Alan, you want to sign us off today?
Well, thanks everybody for listening. This has been the Uptime Podcast. Check us out on the web.
All right. See you next time.